Shiva Swaloke Nirbaram Jananam Krandanad Bhavagnau Visane Pradagdanam Prabodhitasvam Hyagata Viveka Anandate Abhate Pranjali Narendra Shashave Narendra Yogane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Palane Om Satyena Labhyastapassa Yesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Dotirmayo Hi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshina Doshaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self within, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerity, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it existing everywhere, even here in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. Om nicho nichanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman tamatmastam yenu pashanti diraha tesham shanti shashvati netaresham. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. The wise ones realize that one as dwelling in their very self. To them belong peace and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Shravanayapi Bahubhiryo na labhyaha Shrinvatopi Bahavo Yam na vidyahu Ascharyo Gyata Kushalo Shalabda Ascharyo Vakta Kushalo Nushishtaha. Many there are who have never heard of the great self within. Many others, though they hear of it, fail to comprehend it. Fortunate is that one who hears of it. Blessed is the one who speaks of it. But extremely fortunate is that one whom, having heard of it from the lips of an illumined preceptor, is able to realize it here and now, in this very life, in this very moment. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So, Svagatam, welcome everyone to the SRV ashram in Hawaii. We return after some 4 or 5 week absence from Hawaii. And in that absence, I hope many of you on the live streaming audience and My students here in Hawaii also saw the classes on both Saturday and Sunday, in San Francisco on one weekend and in Portland on 2 weekends. And that fourth weekend we were in a retreat in Seattle and plunged very deeply in the timeless teachings of the Vedanta, Yoga, and Sankhya. And now that we have returned to Hawaii, we will have a series of 5 or 6 classes while I'm present here in Hawaii before the spring Dharma visit. And those classes, the first 2 of them, will continue in our series that we were enjoying before I departed for the mainland. We call the U.S. the mainland here in the islands. We were coursing along in the vein of a subject called the devotion of non-separation. The Sanskrit for that is Ananya Bhakti. There are great words like Ananta, infinity, Ananda, unalloyed bliss with no opposite. And there's also other words of that sound. Ananya is one of those, non-separation. Sort of like what Gaudapada speaks about in his Karika in the non-touch yoga, which we will show you and get into soon. The devotion of non-separation brings together 2 great paths, as we see on the chart on the other side of me, on your left. That is the one we will take first for our teachings. We'll look into the reason why the seers who are akamai, or in the know, it's a Hawaiian word this time instead of a Sanskrit word, who are in the know about the union, the natural union of bhakti, devotion, and jnanam, wisdom. Jnanam is not just secular knowledge or intellectual knowledge or knowledge of a pundit or a scholar, but it's specialized knowledge that focuses on spiritual life alone, and it allows one, once it's studied through scripture, through direct transmission, as we were having here in this room, and as I got from my teachers, it allows one to concentrate samadhana on reality alone, on divine reality alone, which is a very difficult thing to do if you haven't ever tried it. If you have tried it, then you know that is something that is advised by the seers, but it's a very subtle practice. That's the third yoga of what we were talking about here, jnana and bhakti, and then dhyan yoga or raja yoga or patanjala or ashtanga. Any one of those 4 words will suffice to begin to describe the yoga of meditation. Te dhyan yoga nugata pasyan devatma shaktim svagunayar nagudim. That is, the Svetasvatara Upanishad says that the devatma shaktim, this divine power in everything, whom we call Divine Mother, is gained by rapt meditation, dhyan yoga. And that meditation, as we will see in charts that we will use today, can take several different forms, as we saw last week in our class in Portland, Oregon, when we looked at the 4 ways of perceiving Brahman. If you were there for that class, either in form or in the formlessness on the live streaming. This subject of Ananya Bhakti was interrupted when we left Hawaii 5 weeks ago, but it was coursing along and I hadn't finished the charts I'd selected for the teaching of it, so I decided to continue it on in this week's class and next week's class. Here you see one of our own beautiful Hawaiian birds, one of those koa eula, they're called. They skim the cliffs of Nepali coast on Kauai, for instance, is where I first saw them. They very rarely ever come to light anywhere except in nests in their cliffs. So as I've studied them, I saw sort of avadut-like. I noticed that they were a good example for the free soul who never comes to earth, or who barely just skims earth, just associates with earth and the human body, but stays very high and elevated in higher mind and higher consciousness. It builds, the koa eula bird builds its nest in the cliffs very high, so it saves it from all danger. And that is there on the ground of existence. You might call it the 6 passions and the 8 fetters and all the various interacting karmas of living beings. So it stays far away from those and builds its nest in the cliffs and then soars at very high elevation on the winds effortlessly. So it's a very good metaphor for that devotee who has blended Jnana and Bhakti, and once having successfully blended those two paths, now meditates on them. That is, as we say, Drishyam Pravitam Pravila Payan San Matram Anandaganam Vibhavayam Samahita San Bahir Antaram Va Kalam Nayetaha Sati Karma Bande. That is Antaram Va, Kalam, that is the outer and the inner, the Bahir and the Antaram, have to be blended into one thing, because they are one thing. Maya has just made them appear as two. So one of the important facets of a spiritual aspirant's life is to take the many and blend them back into a state of homogeneity, oneness, because that's where they sprang from. And then when they work their way out, like down into the gross vibrations of the five elements and the objects of the senses, and the senses themselves, which are fixed on the objects. I mean, unlike the koa eula bird, the vulture's eyes is always fixed on the carrion pit, always fixed on the dead carcass on ground. So he soars very high, but his eyes aren't fixed upwards. That is, from the heart chakra up, they're always fixed on the lower centers. The seats of the eyes are in the head, Sri Ramakrishna said, not down lower. So being in the head, that's a symbol for higher consciousness. They should see, and those two should become one. And then when the eye is single, as Christ said, Jesus put it beautifully, then thou shalt know the truth. So whether you talk about it in terms of the five elements, the five senses, their meeting points, or whether you talk about it in terms of the distracted or scattered minds, or whether you talk about it in terms of philosophy, the four yogas, this strong tendency, this wise leaning towards unification is the mead, the food, the very nutrition of the saints and seers. And those ones who hail from India, not satisfied just to have that oneness for themselves, come forward and spread it to us through very different philosophies or ways of seeing. Darshanas are called, clear ways of seeing. So the devotion of non-separation, more than being just a very pretty title, has a very deep philosophical truth to communicate to us. Non-separation sounds like Advaita or non-duality, like Zen Buddhism or Advaita Vedanta, or Shakta Advaita Vata. I brought a chart on Shakta Advaita, that is the oneness of all things with the mother. And then the other side of the coin is devotion, which seems like it can't really thrive without two-ness. So there has to be a devotee in the act of devotion and the thing to be devoted to. So even threeness is there, or manyness in the path of devotion. That's bhakti. Sometimes they call it the slow boat to China, the slow scenic view, where nobody's in a hurry to get anywhere. They're just enjoying God in form. So it's a very rich, vast tradition. And as the title suggests, this isn't something that we become to X other things out of the equation. We don't become non-dualists, therefore to X out of the equation the other levels of philosophy or the other darshanas or the other yogas, especially as devotees of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that idea of universality and the oneness of existence and the universality of all paths, acceptance of all paths is very important to us. So we can cast our gaze, our inner gaze, anywhere we want in this wide periphery and these rich lands of devotion and philosophy, and see the innate oneness in all things. And then that helps us when we go out into our life too. We can even practice the yoga of that oneness, Ananya Bhakti, in terms of our relationships with people and places and things and even objects. We develop a sort of custodianship, a kind of devotion to objects. We deify them rather than become averse to them, because we know aversion is one of the 5 main obstacles to yoga. Yoga actually means union. So Ananya Bhakti is well named, devotion of non-separation. union yoga is already inferred in the equation, in other words. And then if you're having a problem with that, then devotion just rather gives you a simple, easy way of approaching it, of getting back to square one, or finding all inside of yourself again. So, far from being antagonistic of one another, these two paths, Bhakti and Jnana, are the same at the apex of things. You see. Maybe down at the foundation, they take different routes and use different methods and practices, but my contention is even there they seem to be very much the same, which is why I put together this chart here that I present to you to start off this series of 2 classes to finish up the subject of the devotion of non-separation. You see here, I've made one wing of the bird into Jnana, wisdom, and the other wing of the bird into Bhakti, devotion. In another, and might as well just add in the meditation here, because Sri Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother, has said that meditation is the rudder to your boat. So just like the tail feathers is to the bird, guiding him through the ethers, through the subtle inner ethers, we need this rudder of our boat called Raja Yoga, or the yoga of 8 limbs, leading to meditation, and finally to Samadhi. Samadhi being the 8th and highest limb. We have to learn to meditate. In order to do that, we have to learn to concentrate. And in order to do that, we have to learn how to detach our mind from sense objects. And that's only possible when we get control of our senses and our mind. And that's really made more possible by getting control of our prana, our life force. So on down the scheme of things, if you want to take the Ashtanga Yoga and start at the top limb and come down to the roots, backwards is a good exercise to do, because we know we should evolve, but we should also involve. Evolution is taking us out all the time until we become acclimatized to being out. We start thinking of ourselves as being external or physical beings only. And we forgot that we have this involution process to accomplish every day. And the best way to do that is meditation, is to draw everything back inside oneself. It's actually what one's doing when one goes to sleep tonight and starts dreaming. That's the first step of drawing everything back inside of yourself. You don't know it, but what you're really doing is playing with everything that had solidified itself outside by the power of your mind, and now you're taking it into subtle objects and you're playing with a subtle form of it. And then the next step, you're drawing it all back into the deep sleep state where everything goes formless. So if in every 24-hour period we do this outward march, and then we turn around and do the inward march again, then our waking state should also be based on the fact that if we find ourselves too externalized in any given day of our life, or any given hour of our day, or any given several minute period of our hour, then we should be able to immediately withdraw ourselves back to our peaceful station. You need peace first and foremost, Holy Mother said. Never lose that. That's your foundation. That's your default zone. So it's easier said than done, as we know, because of all the distractions and vagaries and vicissitudes, they say, in life and mind. Life being outward, mind being inward. But, as Christ said, if you develop an inward life, an inner life, then you can blaze that pathway from life back to mind. To me, that is the meaning of the kingdoms of heaven within. They're not, of course, planetary realms outward, because that would just be going further out in space. So the kingdoms of heaven within is a very direct statement Jesus made. And if you look inside to the source of all of creation, you're going to find that it's the great mind that does that. The one vibratory power. All vibrations are in the mind. So Father of Yoga says that at the very get-go, the second sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Nirodha means to destroy or dissolve. So when you destroy the waves of the mind, you get into yoga. Why? Because the waves of the mind are creating the universe of name and form and time and space. And you can put that together with your quantum physics and see how everything's vibrating. So if you follow the trail of that teaching back inside of yourself, then you begin to take vibrations and become a master at vibration. And you begin to nirodha, you begin to just quell them, so just like you would stamp out a flame. And then you find out, after you've stopped all the vibrations of the mind, that you're the one doing the quelling, the stopping, and you're the one also that's left over. You're the residue. You're the essence left over after the dissolution process is complete. It gives you the idea that creation, preservation, and destruction, or projection, sustenance, withdrawal, are all in you, like a tempest in a teapot, they say. But you're the one that's holding the teapot. So when we look at ways of accomplishing the dissolution of the mind stream, the stream of consciousness that's always going out, we want to turn it back in on its source, like turning a light on oneself. Ram Prasad sings in some of his songs, turn instead to the original. It means turn inside and see the Atman, see the archetypical soul, the supreme being within, and take a good look at that. So ways of making that kind of turn are called yogas, as practice. Yoga is the great practice. Samkhya is our science. This is our cosmology, the 24 cosmic principles, so that we know what everything's made of, inner and outer. And then yoga is our practice, and then Vedanta is the truth. So we put together our science with our practice and our truth, and we have a composite picture of ourself. It is the great self, which I just chatted about. A few have known the great self, others, though they heard about it, they fail to comprehend it. So to get a greater realization of what the great self within is all about, then we follow these paths of yoga. So here on this chart, I've put together, across the board, intentionally, the facets of the path of Jnana and the path of Bhakti. You see, let's read the quote at the top first. Jnana and Bhakti, wisdom and devotion, are like the two wings of a bird. A bird cannot fly without two wings. Therefore, O Divine Mother, grant us pure love, pure knowledge, and pure devotion. A quote that I remember of my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, when he was living, and often used that phrase from the podium, the two wings of a bird. Also, we say the body is karma yoga. That is the body engaged in action. So you have the four yogas nicely placed there in the form of this Hawaiian bird. Now, if we look across the board, let's look at the comparative points. Jnana Yoga wants you to study the Shruti, the non-dual scriptures, Advaita. Revealed scriptures, not the ordinary scriptures. That is, scriptures that are dealing with the union of the apparently individualized self with the Supreme Self. And there again, you're practicing the devotion of non-separation, aren't you? Because right now you're thinking of God and mankind as two different things, or creature and creator as two different things. And so you're going to have to, with the unifier of consciousness, bring them together into one, and then meditate on them, be content, happy, and be free. Once you've accomplished that, the natural result would be to enjoy freedom. Be a jivan mukta, a living liberated soul. And there's really no more work to be done after that. There's just observing and then serving. Observing and serving. Observing the laws cosmologically, philosophically, and spiritually, and then serving all beings. You could say serve all beings as God, but it'd be better to say serve God and all beings. And then you take the ego out of the quotient. You see that one reality in all beings. So it wants you to study the Shruti. Shruti means to hear, so it's the same word as Shravana, to hear. That's the first step towards a cogent and lucid spiritual life, is to hear the truth. That always brings the good news back to the soul. It might be sobering at first, but the sobering part is just letting go of unreal things, as Vedanta says. Letting go of vibrating particles that have congealed and turned themselves into an object which you've gotten obsessed with or fastened onto, and you can't let go of it now, so you become dependent. That's not the way yoga wants it to happen. As Patanjali, the father of yoga, said, the problem is that the seer has become identified with the seen. and we want to reverse that trend. So, therefore, detachment is advised early on. Vairagyam is called detachment. So, study of the Shruti tells you about all these truths of how the apparently individualized soul is really one with the Supreme Soul. Jiva is Shiva, the Tantra would put it, or Jivatman is Paramatman, the Vedanta would say. Jivatman is the embodied soul, and Paramatman is the Supreme Soul. They're really one thing. So, root ignorance consists of thinking of them as two-ness. It's not two-ness that we want. Not two-ness is a better phrase than oneness, because oneness limits, but not two-ness gives you the back door, the freedom, to read into phrases like that, more depth. Now across the board you see that the Bhakti Yoga likes you to study the Smriti. So there's the Shruti and then there's the Smriti. Shruti is to be heard and Smriti is to be memorized. See, Smriti means memory. It means those scriptures on record from the memory of great souls that have talked about the relationships between gurus and disciples, between kings and their subjects, between sages and kings, between the priestcraft and the royalty and so forth, all infused with this spiritual backdrop. Karma Yoga, life in action. See? So, itihasa there means scriptural history. Those scriptures that are going to let us know about events that happen in scriptural history. And the secondary scriptures, the Puranas. So if you want to put it on one side, you have the Upanishads, and the other side you have the Puranas. It's sort of a simple way of putting it. Puranas and Tantras over here, and the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutras over here. So the point being here is that the scriptures may differ a little bit in tone and tenor in their approach according to temperament, but both paths want you to study the scriptures. So that's one way of unifying Bhakti and Jnanam. The next level is contemplation on the unity of Jivatman and Paramatman. Once you know that there is oneness, and once you know that there's a rus been created by an apparent two-ness, then you have to contemplate on the oneness of Jivatman and Paramatman. Make thine eye single. That's just the simplest way of putting it. So first you, in your worship on this side, you might see God as the altar. You might have a relationship you're building with the images on the altar. But then pretty soon, because you have worshipped the altar so long, one day you see the altar inside yourself, and you start worshiping inside. You offer flowers inside. You offer hymns inside. You sing hymns in your memory. And you see the deity inside of you. You envision it. It's no different than waking and dreaming. Here you're serving all this, and it's serving you. And inside, the same thing is happening in dream state. So it's the same with outer worship and inner worship. It's very much the same thing. There's a deep connection there. One is a deeper level of devotion, that's all, because we know that God can never be an object, is always the eternal subject. So we're getting closer to the eternal subject when we begin to take the gross object and turn it into the subtle object. And that's why we make our dreams real. Our waking state is dream number 1, and our dreaming state is dream number 2. Some wisdom given to us by Ramana Maharshi in recent times, but we know that they might as well be the same thing, because the same objects are there and the same tendencies are there, the same desires. It's just a difference in vibration. So if you're going to contemplate the unity of the Jivatman and the Paramatman, then you're going to have to render two into one, and that's on a philosophical level that Jnana Yoga wants you to do that through the comprehension of the intellect. Then the Bhakti Yoga wants you to contemplate the Lila, Nara Lila. Nara is man, Narayani is man, God in man. Narayan is God in man. Narayani is woman in God in woman, goddess in woman. And Nara means man, so the Lila is play. So you want to contemplate man's sport as God, and make that the subject of your inner life. Christ in the manger, Ram and Sita in the forest, so sent away to the forest. Radha and Krishna in their sport of love, the gopis and the gopas. Buddha and his life with arhats, 50 arhats that were there, at 500 arhats toward the end of his life. So those are Nara Lila, those are taking the greatest God-realized souls and meditating on their lives, because their lives were sportive. They were sporting in consciousness, they weren't identifying with the body. They were using the body to as a vehicle, a vahana, a vehicle to sport in consciousness, because this is all consciousness to them, because they have rendered the two into one already. Ananya Bhakti is their mental perspective. It's a mental asana that they assume. Now let's look back on the third point of Jnana Yoga, meditation on Brahman, the impersonal reality, or nirguna. Jnana wants you to do away with ignorance and therefore come to realization of the oneness of all existence. Maya matramidam dvaita advaita paramattaha. Basically, those who think in terms of two-ness, they know not. There's really only one reality here, and it's appearing as the many. So, Jnana would want you to meditate on Brahman, the impersonal reality, beyond name and form, beyond qualities, gunas, nirguna Brahman. It's beyond attributes or qualities. Across the board, Bhakti Yoga would want you to meditate on Ishvara. As you know, as members of Ramakrishna Loka, that is the SRV and Ramakrishna order and so forth, is that you're asked to do both. You're asked to meditate on the impersonal God, and you're asked also to meditate on Ishvara with the mantra. So those two practices you hold simultaneously. So there again, you're taking two and making them one, aren't you? Every time you sit. Your act of sitting down is like saying the personal God and the impersonal God are one thing. They're just in two different aspects. They appear in two different aspects for the highest good of the devotees. Those devotees who are not able or not inclined, either one, to worship God, the formless, will then have an easy access to divine reality through the form, through the divine form. Meditate on Ishvara, the personal God. That's saguna, with attributes. So these explanations are a way of helping the soul grapple with these apparent dichotomies that exist in the mind. Quite often for most people, they're in the backdrop of the mind. They're not real issues because they haven't gotten to a place yet where they're sincere about seeking truth. Know the truth and the truth shall set you free. They're still working with the world. They're still desiring things in the world. That's why we just chanted, the self is realized by knowledge, austerity, veracity, moderation, so forth. And when this practice is done, is cultivated, then mental impurities dissolve, and then the Atman comes forward. It's not like you have to go find God somewhere. You just have to remove the impurities of the mind, and God is standing staring in the face. It was just those impurities that acted as veils or false superimpositions that kept you from the vision of your own self. You are the darling of your own worship, as the Tantras would put it. But you're not seeing yourself as something worthy of worship yet, because the body isn't really worthy of worship. The senses aren't really worthy of worship. Even the mind, until it's purified, isn't really worthy of worship. Those are mechanisms that need purification. So when they're pure, then one sees God everywhere. And when they're impure, one sees nothing but the impure world. And struggles with it, and suffers. So Nirguna and Saguna Brahman, one of those charts I was showing in Portland over the last 2 weekends in classes, those are ways the ancient rishis taught us how to make the two one, to practice Ananya Bhakti. God is with form, God is also beyond form, and God is beyond both form and formlessness as well, as Sri Ramakrishna put it, a direct quote from him. Now the next level, perform action as detached witness knowing the world to be unreal. The Jnana Yoga wants you to see through the appearances of things and go for the ultimate reality, not take any wooden nickels. The Vedantists don't take any wooden nickels. They want the truth and the truth alone. And they're going to test it from both sides, up and down, inside and out, with their discriminating intelligence. So that discriminating intelligence is based on the ability to detach. A person's discrimination is in question when they're attached to anything. They don't have that objectivity yet. So when they can detach from something and be perfectly equanimous, equal-minded, then they have the ability of observation without any mars or errors. See? So detachment is very important. Sometimes you put it in terms of abshobha. Abshobha means non-emotionalism. Sanskrit has words for all of these things that showed that they were thinking about it in very early terms. So if we can get it beyond the emotional level of things and beyond the level of passion and get dispassion or detachment, then the mind begins to clear, and you can get some reflection and you can get some powers of observation both. Those are both important to spiritual life according to the Jnana Yoga. So they want to make sure the mind is pure of those kinds of overlays before it engages in action, before it engages in thought, and before it engages in meditation. Meditation is not a good purifier. It's not supposed to be used for that. Jnana purifies the mind, Bhakti purifies the heart, karma purifies the body and senses. Meditation is supposed to be left for my meeting with God. Once body, mind, senses, heart are all pure, then I meditate, see. Otherwise, it's just an attempt at concentration, and concentration is not working because I haven't been able to withdraw my mind from objects yet successfully for any given length of time, even if it was for 1 hour this morning. See. So meditation is not a good purifier. It's not its purpose. It's for meeting God face to face. It's not for health. It's not for visions. Vision happened back when you were having your early separation from Maya. See, when you first saw ignorance, that was the vision you wanted. Oh, I'm ignorant. I'm ignorant of the truth. That's the vision you wanted. All other visions were superfluous. Because when you got rid of the ignorance, then you started building character. And character is real spiritual life. At least in this world. In this world, character is what you're after. And that's going to be an intricate part of your internal samskaras. Your mental makeup again, your mental asana is going to be based on character. And you get character from long suffering and practice and insight, realization that you gleaned from doing sincere austerities and gaining knowledge and veracity, constantly cultivated, you see. So that's what I would say about the real purpose of meditation. Not for healing or for a healing power or health or visions or to slow the heart rate or for longevity and those things. No, it's for meeting with God, the Paramatman with the Jivatman. Jnana Yoga clears it up for you. On the next level, it also wants to let you know that when you perform action, you should perform it as a detached witness. The simplest way to say that is, I'm not the doer. It's not something that can be pretended, is the problem. People hear that and they say, oh, that sounds great. It's a way of diffusing the ego, see, by saying I'm not the doer. But you can't just give it mere lip service like a parrot. It does actions and gets itself into trouble, falls into the cat's jaws, you see. And, just parroted the mantra. But the mantra, I'm not the doer, has to be based on the knowledge that all actions, as Krishna says in the Gita, happen in nature, not in the soul. Now, there's a nice clarifying point for the Jnana yogi, or for the one who's using the left-hand side of the bird the right-hand side of the bird's wings right now, you see, to keep itself afloat. See, it's a clarifying point. Now across the board, we see Bhakti wants you to perform all action as sacrifice. So, detached witness by the Jnana Yoga and performing all action as sacrifice, the Bhakti Yoga. Either way, the ego is being taken out of the quotient. Or, you say, the Jnani would say, well, the world's not real, so any acts I do in it also are not real. They're all happening in nature, not in the soul. The soul is just the observer. The soul's reading the book of nature, and nature is where all action is taking place, but the soul doesn't move when it reads the book. It just takes it all in, closes the book, and puts it down. So that's the Jnana Yoga perspective. See? The Bhakti Yoga perspective is God is in everything, so I have to make everything an offering. So every act I do is going to be an offering to the Lord. Not to the ego, not to people, not to human beings. I can't go and serve human beings. This is not good. It's not going to be good for them. I have to go serve God and human beings. If you serve them as human beings, they tend to stay human. You might have noticed. But if you serve God in them, the human nature begins to turn divine. So that's the whole trick, if you will, of work as worship, labor as love. Those ideas that Vivekananda brought forward to us in the English language. There's a great Sanskritist, and he spoke Bengali. When he learned the English, he began to put these turns of phrase. God is not in the world is in God. Do all work as worship. Do all labor as love. You just read his complete works and you'll see how he took the English language and just turned it on its ear and infused it with the spirituality of India, of these great darshanas. So, the Jnani side, I'm going to, detach from the results of all action. The Bhakti side, I'm going to make it all an offering. And then you have the two wings of the bird. These might be applicable in different situations of your life in any given day. But some actions you're going to have to determine whether it's best to be the observer or the sacrificer. And other actions you might have to do the opposite, take on the sacrifice. So to detach or to engage, see, to be or not to be is not the question. It's whether to attach and to engage, that's the question. Because to be or not to be is not a question. It shouldn't be to the Indian seer. You are, so you are true being. You can't not be. Nothing doesn't exist. You always are. Everything is. There are many ways to say that. So the real question is whether to engage or whether to detach, and when, to know when to do that. And that's the karma yoga side of it, you see. So the body will be guided by wisdom and devotion as it comes around in course, and will be guided, all three will be guided by your meditation, which is the time when you meet the divine face to face. Like Gandhi said about Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when we see Ramakrishna, we see God face to face. Mahatma Gandhi said that. So a great avatar, great soul like that leaves no doubt. And you lay your eyes on a soul like that, this is your meeting with God in form. This is your chance. And it can happen even several hundred years after that soul has passed from the body. You might have noticed. People are still worshiping Christ after 2,000 years and Buddha after 2,550 years. But the fresher the manifestation, the better. This new dispensation of Sri Ramakrishna is only a couple hundred years old, if that. So we have a great opportunity to meet God in the parlor, in the drawing room, right there in the heart. That's what he said himself. I meet the devotees here in the heart. I can't go any lower. This is where I'll meet you. He used to say that. He said, those who want truth in this age will come here. And he'd hit his own heart. So I think that's a twofold meaning. They'll come to the heart chakra where the devotees meet with God in the Nara Lila, they'll also come to Ramakrishna, who is the divine manifestation in the sage, the avatar, the Kali avatar. So you can see where I'm going with this. Scriptures, contemplation, meditation, and action, right? Taking aspects right out of the four yogas themselves and making them a party for study, subjects for study inside of each yoga. This is how to integrate or how to synthesize. It is the art of Ananya Bhakti, the yoga of non-separation. Again, you can't just say the term and say, that's lovely, that's pretty, I like that. Or take it a step further. Oh, it's just Advaita, put it together with Parabhakti, is the supreme devotion. But you're going to have to get in and cut it up. See, put it together in different ways. Look at it in different forms. Roll your mind over it. That's Shruti and Smriti. See, hear it and then begin to contemplate it. Well, let's look at the mantra then. Recitation of the mantra in line with meaning, insight, and willpower. We have the mantra as a part of the Jnana Yoga, Darshana. Across here, how does Bhakti look at the mantra? Recitation of the mantra in line with love, empathy, and self-surrender. So take or choose any of those great words. Monopoli Pajakali Icha Hoy Torjaya Chari Guru Data Moha Mantra Ivaneshi Japakori Monopoli Pajakali. O mind, meditate on Mother Kali using any method of worship you like. Or simply repeat the seed mantra given to you by your guru, planted in your heart. That's what he's saying. Meditate on the mystery of Mother Kali using any method of devotion or wisdom you want, as we were just saying here. Using the Bhakti, Jnana way of meaning, insight, and willpower. What's meaning? By knowing what every little matra means in the mantra. You know what every matra means? You might know what every word means in it, but you know what every matra means, every letter. And you know that inside of each matra there are hundreds and thousands of particles. Just like there are particles in food, there are particles in objects, you know now, due to quantum physics. And there are particles in the body called nadis, streams of life force moving. So meditate on the meaning. You could spend hours doing that. I do. I have. Where do you think I came up with 250 of these? Are they just I magicked them? Prestidigitation? Sim salabim. See, all of a sudden the charts came out. No, I've thought about them for 40 years, ever since my teacher first put the seed of the mantra in my heart. Monopoli Bhajakali, he was a worshipper of Kali. Sri Ramakrishna was Kali avatar. So, meaning. I mean, you could stop right there, go no further. We could talk about that for the rest of the 2 hours. Meaning. What's in a word, they say? Everything is in a word. But you have to take the word down to matras and the matras down to particles and understand it not just on the level of intellect, which is what the Westerner is prone to do. That's one level. It's at least more than illiteracy, although Sri Ramakrishna himself was illiterate. It is at least an intellectual advantage that we have on most other people with our learning, but what we really want is higher learning. Aparavidya has been known from time out of mind. Science, math, astronomy, arts. But the Paravid is known by very few. We just chanted that. Well, very few have ever heard of the Atman. Fewer still, when they hear of it, even try to contemplate it or comprehend it. That's their conclusion by observation over many lifetimes. There's been an observer watching us live and die. We ourselves are that observer. That's why we know there are many lifetimes in us, because somebody's been watching. And we're still here watching. Have we gone away? You and I could have been sitting like this thousands of years ago saying these very same things. This isn't new. This is ancient. Better yet, it's timeless. But how many times do we have to sit here like this? See? How much problem did it take us to get here? How many obstacles did we have to encounter to be here? Like this together. So, in line with the mantra, you have meaning, insight, and willpower. That's what the Jnani wants you to get out of the mantra. That's what the Jnani's thinking when he thinks mantra. The Bhakta is thinking, when he thinks mantra, love, empathy, and self-surrender. That's going to be my vehicle. That's how I'm going to get rid of this rascally ego and take it down to the least common denominator, get it out of the way, out of the picture, and then I will see my beloved face to face. The mantra is the name of God. As soon as I say it, God will appear. It's that deep faith that comes. And if you loved your teacher and your teacher gave you the mantra, then your respect for it, your reverence for it is even that much greater. Particularly if it came from a long line of people who have said that mantra. I gave a mantra in prison to one woman several weeks ago. I think God will forgive me for that. But the poor dear is in for life. What can I do? She wanted a mantra. I gave it to her. She was ready for it. The prison walls will be nothing to her now, as the mantra will open up the freedom which is within her. A freedom which is not founded or based on anything external. Any walls or bars or impediments that are external cannot keep out the light of the mantra. It's not like an earthly light. You can put up a curtain. So mantra has so many sides to it, and it's shared by all four of these. The Jnani wants it, as we just said, the Bhakti thinks of it another way, but the meditator also is using it. Most meditators will start out with the mantra to calm the mind, and then when they calm the mind through mantra, then they can get into a state of formlessness. And then when they come out of that state of formlessness and they feel a little disoriented, coming back to this old waddled, my teacher used to call it, this world, then the mantra will occur to them again and they'll have a station to bring themselves back into form. In and out, in and out. The only thing you have to bring yourself back out of deep sleep is the ego. It's pretty dependable for that, too. It wants you to come back and enjoy the world, so it's going to bring you out of deep sleep back into dreaming and waking. But the seer doesn't go into deep sleep as a fool. Goes in as a seer and dissolves the universes in name and form that occur in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and brings them back due to his own insight, see? Due to his own willpower, because he knows the mantra and has faith in the mantra. He knows it inside out, every mantra. Most mantras begin with Om, so A, U, and M is going to be the first triple object of his study. What does A mean? What does U mean? What does M mean? I got to go ask my teacher. I have to go consult the scriptures, the Shruti. I have to memorize it, Smriti. I have to see Itihasa, how many people used it in the past and what record they left behind of doing the mantra. See how it all connects, just all the time? There's nowhere that you can go or can't go, there you won't find this connecting power. And unlike the connecting power of nature, which you want to get out of, the connecting power of wisdom leads you out of bondage, not back in. Connecting power of nature, the interconnectedness of all things, leads you back into bondage, which is where you go when you come out of deep sleep, back into bondage. In deep sleep you were at least momentarily free from form, but now you've covered yourself with it again. Congratulations. And when you cover yourself with it again, then you think, gee, I wish I could get out. This rascally little boy, Hari, you see, put a sheet over his head one night and went and scared his sister. She was really scared. Boo! He popped into the room and scared her. But she was a discriminating little girl. And she said, I don't think ghosts exist. Why did I get so scared? The next night, Hari had this fun again on his sister. He put the sheet and went back in to the room to scare her. And she was a little scared, and she looked more carefully. But the third night, she actually walked up to him and ripped the sheet off and said, I see it's you, you rascal. So we may get scared a little bit in our deep sleep state, in our formless state. But when we come back into form again and we see the comparison between form and formlessness, then we will, the next time we go into meditation, the next time we have that rare opportunity of going formless consciously, not going formless unconsciously like in deep sleep, but going formless consciously, the opportunity of having samadhi at whatever level, then we will strip the covering away. And we will do it boldly. And then we will have willpower and insight. Well, if we've done it once, we know we can do it again. That's the stuff of a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated soul. It's what a living liberated soul can do all the time. Swami Vivekananda, probably one of the best examples of that. Read about him and his life. It's not just his complete works that are available to us, but it's a copious record of his life, based on so many people that saw him both in India and in America in the 18 and 1900s. So we see a Jivan Mukta walking around on earth. Actually, a Nityasiddha would be a better way of saying it. An eternally perfect soul, as Ramakrishna called him. So mantra, very important there. The final entry there is devotion to the path of discrimination to gain pure love. But the Bhakti says devotion to the path of love to gain pure discrimination. So you can see how both devotion and discrimination are important to both sides of the coin, and both the Bhakta and the Jnani use them both in their own way. Under Jnana Yoga, devotion to the path of discrimination will remove ignorance. Nahi jnanena sadrishyam pavitramiha vijite. Discriminating knowledge is the greatest purifier in all the worlds, Krishna says. And he's the God of love in India. So he's telling you in the Gita, if you have discrimination, then you will all of a sudden gain pure love. Again, beautiful songs sung about that. Prodita Satya Vibodha Marichi Proksida Visha Padartha Satatvaha Bhava Paramrita Nirbhara Purne Tvaya Hamadmati Nirvrita Memi. One of the beautiful verses out of the Bhairava Stotram by Abhinavagupta. He wants to tell you, this is basically pure knowledge, pure devotion, and pure love. These are the gifts that Shiva bestows on his precious devotees, he says. So, knowing this, may all the impurities of my mind become like dust beneath Shiva's dancing feet. That's how he sings it. May all the impurities of my mind become like dust beneath Shiva's dancing feet, because he has given me pure knowledge, pure devotion, and pure love. So, this is how the Jnani, singing a devotional song, would express it. When we were on tour in the early days with Jaima Music, all over the world, mostly in the United States, but other countries too, and we would sing these beautiful songs to people. We'd have a 1-month tour, maybe give 24, 25 concerts. So almost every night we were giving a concert in a different state. We would drive a day to another state, give a concert at a location. All prearranged and with Lex Hickson in tow. to do our translations for us. So we would give these beautiful offerings to different kinds of people in the West. Sometimes we'd use Indian dancers and tabla players, and it was a big production. So I remember on several occasions being with Lex at the break or after the concert, and people would come up and said, "Oh, those are beautiful devotional songs," and you would say, "Wait a minute, those are not devotional songs. Those are devotional wisdom songs." Because we were playing to an element back in the 70s and 80s that was all into kirtan and dancing. It was the early kirtan movement in the West. And Lex didn't particularly think very highly of that, dancing and singing. He loved to do it. The time was right. But what he wanted was people to do away with their ignorance via discrimination so they could have pure love. Then the dancing wouldn't be affected. You wouldn't say, I think I'll go dance at a kirtan tonight, you see. You would break into dance right where you were. You'd stand up and start dancing. Didn't matter if people were looking or not, or if there was music or going or not, or if you were dressed in your best yoga clothes or not. See? It was spontaneous. They say that was how Sri Ramakrishna danced, like a plume of smoke and a lion combined. That was the description. When Mother took him over and he just stood up and started dancing. A sight to see. So we want to use this discrimination to do away with ignorance so that we can gain pure love. And everything will be a dance. The ocean will be dancing for us. The trees will be dancing in the wind for us. Crowds of people moving through the city will be a dance. You see, it'll all be divine. Well, across the board here then, Bhakti is saying, but how about devotion to the path of love to gain pure discrimination? So Bhakti wants to put that first foot forward. See, love is the foundation for everything. And there's no arguing with that. So what happens to the Bhakta when he sincerely loves his ishtam, or her ideal, her chosen ideal form? Then, Krishna says in the Gita, then they come to me and I give them the discrimination which will free them. See? There's the God of love talking from the opposite standpoint again. Yes, when they get devotion to me, then they will come to me and I will give them the discrimination by which they will get free. Can you call Jnana superior to Bhakti or Bhakti superior to Jnana? Are you going to get into that old bag again? Or even once you get into it over ages, it becomes a sort of antagonistic fight between the two perspectives, between the Vaishnavas and the Shaivites. But there was a story about Ram, Vaishnava, and Shiva, the Shaivite god, you see. They were talking and they got into a little tiff, you see. They argued with each other. They got a little heated, and so they turned and walked away from each other. As Ram was walking away from Shiva, he said, "What have I done? I may have insulted the God of wisdom. I'm going to go back right away and apologize." So he turned on his heel to go back. In the meantime, Shiva was walking and he stopped and he said, "Ram is my own heart. He's devotion incarnate. He's God in human form. What have I done? I have to go back and apologize." He turned. So they met in the middle and hugged, you see. The matter was over in seconds. But Ram's monkeys and Shiva's demons heard about the fight. And they went on warring for hundreds of years. Long after the two had already made up, seconds before after the tiff even happened, you see. There's a very good story about keeping these distinctions, holding these distinctions, that brother and sister wouldn't talk with each other for a whole lifetime because of a few words that were exchanged. It happens all the time. These grudges are held. See, this karma is built up around them. All around nothing, really. And we can't see through that and just forgive. See? They say forgiveness is healing. It would have been better if we never would have had to forgive in the first place. If we just, like my teacher used to say, well, we have to agree to disagree then. And the matter was over. Each went their own way, found out that what the other was saying was true, and came back and said, from that perspective, I see what you're saying. I can acknowledge that. So this is the way to integrate paths. synthesize yogas. Integral yoga, purna yoga, it's called. Or Aurobindo called it the synthesis of yoga, or integral yoga. He wrote big tomes on it. So a simple Hawaiian bird can teach it to you. Put your left wing here, put your right wing there. See, the body and the tail feathers, it's all one yoga. See, it's all one state of consciousness. So that last one is particularly fun, I think. The Jnani says, devotion to the path of discrimination to gain pure love. And the Bhakti says, devotion to the path of love to gain pure discrimination. The last quotes underneath each here is what I was saying. Under the Jnana side, Krishna says, to those who know me in full, I reveal myself. I am dear to them and they are dear to me. So to know him first, not just to see him and say, oh, I love you. See? It's love at first sight. When did love at first sight ever last very long? See? You have to come to know the person, and then probably you'll divorce them. Or you'll know the wrong side of them. You see, you know they're studying their ego, but you haven't studied their divine self yet, because you haven't seen the divine self in you yet. The other side, Krishna says, to those who love me, I gave them the discrimination by which they come to me. So both of those are necessary. Vivekananda puts it this way in one of his most beautiful quotes. This is the new religion of this age, the synthesis of yoga, knowledge, devotion, and work. The propagation of knowledge and devotion down to the very lowest, without distinction of age or sex. Thus I want to give truth dry, hard reason, softened in the sweetest syrup of love, made spicy with intense work, and cooked in the kitchen of yoga, so that even a baby can easily digest it. And there you have the new dispensation, according to Swami Vivekananda. Taking the 4 yogas, which he brought to us, and yes, turning them into a synthesis for those of us who have created them as separate airtight compartments, but really showing us the innate oneness of them already. It's not something you really need to synthesize. You only take something apart, like a scientist does, to see how the whole thing works, and you put it back together. But it was whole to begin with. You just didn't know it's working, so you had to take it apart. And that helped your discrimination. And when you had knowledge, devotion came, and love came to you. So these 2 complementary paths is what I name this chart, and it's very much in keeping with our Ananya Bhakti, the devotion of non-separation. Now, let's move in the remaining time in this first half to the non-touch yoga, Asparsha yoga. It's mentioned by Gaudapada, who was Shankaracharya's teacher's teacher, most likely. He also very well known in all philosophical circles for having composed that commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad is like 12 slokas long, and it's all about Om. And so Gaudapada takes each sloka and does a commentary on it, and it became famous. And in that commentary, aspects of it were things like this, the non-touch yoga, Sparsha yoga. He has the firebrand, a beautiful chapter on the firebrand. It's a set of slokas about the illusion of things. You take a firebrand at night and a stick with a fiery end and twirl it. It looks like a circle, right? It's not a circle. So your eyes are playing tricks on you, as it were. So he uses that phenomenon to illustrate the illusoriness of Maya. He starts out here by saying, I salute the best of beings, who with incomparable jnana has realized that all beings are unborn and infinite, like the sky. I salute him on bended knee, he who teaches the non-touch yoga for the benefit of all beings, free of compromise, superior and unopposed. The way he speaks about Advaita is very beautiful like that. So he calls it infinite, like the sky. Reminds us that later on, when his student, or his student's student, Shankaracharya, was teaching, there was a great disciple of his named Hasta Amalaka, and he sang it this way. Samasteshu vastush panushu tam evam Yatha nishprabham manyate chati mudaha Tata bhavad patiyo muda drishte Sa nichopalabdis swarupohamatma. He says, there is only this one, existing in all beings and everything existing in it. It filters down and touches all hearts, yet nothing can touch it. It is like the sky, pure and serene, subtle and impossible to taint. That one am I. I am that one, and there can be none other. So you can see how Gaudapada's teachings got utilized later by disciple after disciple, and finally trickling down into Hasta Amalaka's mind, got expressed in one of the verses of this stotram. Hasta Amalaka stotram, it's named after him. Hasta Amalaka means fruit in the palm of your hand. The implication is that I have come to know through the synthesis of all the yogas of my Atman, and now I can take it out and see it, just as if you would easily take a fruit and look at it in the palm of your hand. It's that easy for me to see my own self, to know my own nature. So, an illumined being says that. Then later on, of course, that Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam Mudamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukarin Karine. That beautiful hymn that Shankara wrote the first verses on, and got expanded by every acharya of the Shankara Mat, every generation, until the hymn has now got dozens and dozens of verses. In one lifetime they added one verse, each of them. So it's been a song that's been growing since 700 AD. Maybe one or two verses added every 120 years or so. So now, sometime we'll sing that whole thing on Shankara's birthday, which is coming up in May, by the way. We will have a beautiful retreat on the confluence of the Wind Rivers and Columbia River in the Columbia River Gorge. Beautiful location where we will talk about Buddhism and Vedanta. I intend to take Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism and show how they too are synthesized, how they are really innately one. Buddha was a Hindu man, if you want to put it that way. So in that way we see that these darshanas of India are naturally one with one another. So, non-touch yoga, what does that mean? He says, he salutes that one of incomparable jnana who has realized that all beings are unborn and infinite like the sky, which reminded me of this beautiful verse in the Hasta Amalaka stotram. It is untouched and pure like the sky. Like the sky carries different scents. The ethers carry planets and so forth, but they never get tainted by it. It stays indivisible, undisplaceable. Ether is undisplaced. Air can be displaced, but ether can't be displaced. So it's all pervasive. It's one of the best examples, metaphors for divine reality on the physical level then. That is, if you acknowledge the existence of ether. You have to get by that first. Mm-hmm. Some sciences don't. What are the requisites of non-touch yoga? As we look into the subject of Ananya Bhakti, that is the devotion of non-separation, we go a little bit away from the practical, the devotional, and the discriminatory towards the transcendent when we look at something like Gaudapada's Karika. But nonetheless, the results are translatable into things that we very much empathize with, understand, and seek. The practice of non-duality, if you want to call it that, it's a kind of contradiction in terms, but Shankara himself, while we're speaking of it, said, I like to keep the mirror of my mind wiped clean every day so I can have the best vision of divine reality. So if my mind is, once I've realized God, I still have a mind. See, if I haven't left the body yet, I still have a mind. And the mind, by its very nature, collects defects. So I have to keep it wiped clean every day, even if I'm an illumined soul. See? So that's the practice of non-duality. It's not like taking dust fragments off of a mirror, literally, but it's looking and watching its tendency to gravitate back toward root ignorance, to believe in things unreal, start to fall out of yoga, out of equanimity. Some little thing, brood on some little thing, and all of a sudden the mind is taking you in tangents, you see. So it says, I want to keep my mind polished every day, like a mirror. So that's the practice non-duality, Advaita Vedanta sadhana. We talked about it in the very earliest days of SRV's inception. Advaita Vedanta sadhana. One of our earliest newsletters had an article on that. It's also in our Nectar journals, an article on that. So some of the requisites are this: you get freedom from fear, self-control and perseverance. You moderate all desires and enjoyments. Remember we just chanted Satyena labhyastapasa hesa atma samyak gnana brahmacharyena nityam. So we get realization of ourself through veracity, austerity, knowledge, and moderation. The middle way. We always moderate senses and appetites. We even have to moderate bhakti and jnana, don't we? There's another way of putting it. If you want to practice the Ananya Bhakti, the yoga of non-separation, then it's not just a matter of synthesizing, integrating, or realizing the innate oneness of things, but it's also having to moderate between them, as I did here. So moderate desires and enjoyments. Awaken the mind and have samadhi. And there's a good goal for you. If you happen to sit down and next New Year's and say, somebody asks you, what's your New Year's resolutions? Well, actually I've been thinking about it and I've decided I want to awaken my mind and have samadhi. Have you ever heard anyone say that about their New Year's resolutions? Probably rarely. Or gain enlightenment. What is enlightenment? It is the remembrance of God moment to moment. That's called enlightenment. Have you tried that? How easily the mind gets distracted away. So to awaken the mind is going to be to awaken it from the age-old sleep of ignorance, to get yogic insomnia, like say, Lex Sixon used to say. And as we were just saying about a mind that's in non-duality, does that mean it's perfect and pure, all hunky-dory? Or is it that he's going to have to stabilize the mind during unrest? Well, the mind go into periods of unrest because that's the way the mind is. Any mind. If you talk about original mind or pure mind or God's mind, then you're talking about something that's extraordinary mind. It's not ordinary mind. But if you're talking about manas, that vehicle which consciousness has to operate in, which it has to use as a station, that all beings have to come down to it, then it's fraught with dualities. It's full of imperfections. You'll never purify that mind. That's not what we're talking about when we say purify your mind. We're talking about realizing your true nature, your original mind. That manas is dual by nature. It's a good bit of information to put in the old hopper. What am I doing when I'm purifying the mind? And the senses, like taking my eyeball out like Captain Bligh and polishing it off or something, so you're putting it back in. Oh, I purified my senses. Or getting into the mind with some scrub brush or something, see, into the brain. The brain is just a bit of flesh. But that mind is going to have to, again, just like you know the mantras of Om, A-U-M, or the meanings of words, you're going to have to know the distinctions between lower mind, intellectual mind, higher mind, original mind, and no mind. Non-touch yoga is no mind. As my teacher used to say, humorously, no mind, no matter. No matter, never mind. If there's no mind, there's no matter, there's no world. Instance, when you go to sleep tonight in deep sleep, there's no world. Sim salabim. Presto changeo, no world. I dissolved it. Or I went away from it somehow, but it can't be denied you went into formlessness. so it's gone. See? So when the mind experiences periods of unrest, then the real test of an illumined soul is if he can stabilize it. And then the real test of a past master is how quickly he can stabilize it. How quickly he can recognize. Abhikya, recognition, see, is one of the great tantric teachings, one of the greatest of all tantric teachings. You have to recognize a thing first before you can do something about it, or to it, or for it. Like if you recognize human beings are God, walking around on two legs, then you can do something for it, for humanity. But not until. So it's the same on all levels of existence. And philosophy then would be no different, as we see. So recognition is going to be one of the great stabilizers for the mind. You catch it really quick. Like Vivekananda said, the karmas of those good, pure souls come back quicker to them. The karmas of those impure souls take a long time to come back. So that's because of their power of recognition. And some karma surfaces in the mind, they recognize it right away and adjust. Or when some anger flares up, or some lust, or some jealousy, or some fear, that's how they get freedom from fear, is when it comes up, they recognize it. And then all of a sudden they're not afraid anymore because they recognize it was their fear and they could do something about it. So that's a beautiful teaching. Stabilize the mind during unrest. Very Buddhist too. The big connection between Patanjali, Shankara, Gaudapada, Nagarjuna, and Lord Buddha, that whole phase of 550 BC up to around 750 AD, heavily laden, laced in a beautiful way with the confluence of Buddhism and Advaita and Vedanta. The final one here, attain the goal, Brahman. That's the practice of non-duality. I leave you with these to think about at our break, and we will keep this chart showing and maybe show this chart again during the break for our live streaming audience, and we will return in about 15 minutes. Thank you for your attention to this precious subject. Om. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe, Gatung Yagyaya, Gatung Yenupataye, Daivi Swastarastu Naha, Swastir Manusebhyaha, Urdhvam Chikatu Pesajam, Sangnoastu Dvipade Sangchatushpate, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a great offering into the Great Self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings then be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We encourage the chanting of this hymn composed in a sacred Himalayan mountain retreat. Devoted recitation of these verses on Swami Vivekananda imbues one with physical vigor, mental strength, and spiritual power, and increases discrimination and detachment. In this brilliant dawn, the collective awakening of all beings to higher truth, we offer Narendranath, the leader of souls, our eternal salutations. Narendra Shashove, Narendra Yomane, Narendra Kridane, Narendra Shikshane, Narendra Palane, Narendra Yarpane, Vivekanandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi, Vivekanandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi, Vivekanandate, Prabhate Pranjalihi.